All right, welcome back, Prospects Live viewers. We're back with another 2020 MLB Draft team preview. Joining me today is Brian Smith of @Cubs Prospects on Twitter. We, of course, are breaking down the Chicago Cubs. Brian, thanks for joining me. We'll pull up a little graphic right here. Cubs are an interesting organization because they sort of are like almost bipolar in terms of drafting. They've had some completely amazing picks, over Theo Epstein's reign there. And they've had some low points as well. I mean, just going back over the last, few years, they've had a handful of guys. They've hit on guys like Nico Horner, guys like Brennan Davis, but they've had some misses as well, particularly when it comes to arms, guys like Brennan Little, etc. So talk to me a little bit about, what you think the approach is here with the Cubs and just in general, what their general approach and draft philosophy tends to be.
Yeah, usually during the Theo era, it's been college hitters at the top. I mean, Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, Ian Happ, those guys that have hit have all been college hitters. They haven't actually drafted and developed a pitcher since Jeff Samardzija in the organization. And so they're definitely hoping to break that trend. They got a new scouting director this year, Dan Kantrovitz, who had run some really successful drafts for the St. Louis Cardinals from 2012 to 2014, and then moved to be the assistant GM with the A's, but I know he was also heavily involved in their drafts there. And so I think Dan's success with pitching was really important to the Cubs. He drafted Michael Wacha, Jack Flaherty, Marco Gonzalez, just to name a few. And so I think that it's really possible they think they're better positioned now to identify the better pitchers in the draft than they have been in the past.
So sort of harping on that a little bit, are there any arms or players in particular that you've heard, number one, the Cubs rumored to be, sort of sniffing around or, potential picks and guys that, you've seen mocked out or whatever to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with this draft being so college pitching heavy, I think they're going to be pretty happy to see if one of those top sort of 5 college arms drops to them at pick 16. I think one guy that I've definitely have in mind is Cade Cavalli from Oklahoma. He's somebody that's close friends with Cole Franklin, one of the better Cubs pitching prospects right now, and they've been working out together this spring. And the Cubs will have good knowledge both on Cavalli in the past and how he's been just in the past few months. And I think that he's somebody that could really appeal to them as somebody who's developing a second breaking ball and has a pretty good 3-pitch mix with a really live fastball. And, Kantrovitz has really liked big physical pitchers in his past drafts, and I think Cavalli fits the bill.
Absolutely. And credit to Perfect Game on that video right there. Sort of digging in a little bit more here. Who do you think the Chicago Cubs are going to end up drafting there at 16?
Yeah, I think they're going to – I think it'll mostly be best pitcher available. I still have to be convinced that they'll consider a high school pitcher. That's something they just have not done at the top of drafts. They tend to take high school pitchers in the middle rounds. Maybe they might go above slot there if they can find a college guy in round 3 or 4 that'll sign for less, then they'll get a high school pitcher later. But they haven't really gone for that at the top, and until they do, I wouldn't project that out. I think they're going to be really happy to see who falls and to be the landing spot for one of those guys, whether it be somebody like Cavalli or somebody like Austin Hendrick. Anyone that fits that bill. The Cubs will spend every dollar they're allowed to from their bonus pool. They pretty much do that every year. And so I think that they're not going to be scared away by bonus demands like maybe a few teams drafting ahead of them will be.
Yeah, and they might have a little bit of restrictions there because they are sort of in the mid-tier, I think, with about $6.1 million or so, if I remember correctly, in terms of bonus money, which isn't the bottom of the draft, but the discrepancy from sort of the top with the Orioles and some of those teams and the bottom, with the Astros and the Yankees is rather large. So kind of an interesting wrinkle to this year's draft. But let me put on the hypothetical hat for a second. You are the hypothetical GM of the Chicago Cubs. Who do you want to target at 16? Is there a name in particular, a guy that, your favorite pick? If this guy lands here, I'm going to be doing, the happy dance or whatever.
Yeah, he was the guy that I took in the Prospects Live mock draft a couple weeks ago. But Tennessee lefty Garrett Crochet is a guy who I like better than most people. As long, I should say up front, as long as the medicals are okay, I think he's somebody that is going to have to convince any team that takes him that the shoulder and elbow are going to hold up, especially with a delivery that's not exactly prototypical. But Garrett's somebody who, with his fastball, is going to be able to throw that pitch 60 to 75% of the time and be okay. And I think that most of the time we worry about whether a guy can make it as a starter if he doesn't have three good pitches and maybe even a fourth pitch developing. Garrett's somebody that I think will be okay with mostly two pitches and a little hint of a third, because those first two pitches are just so good.
Yeah, and there's the tunnel that the fastball and slider sort of share makes them if you didn't have velocity readings, you're just watching like raw video, it's almost impossible to tell them apart. They're absolutely disgusting pitches, in my opinion, 2.6s. So I'm with you there, and if he's got a usable changeup, that's fine. He's pretty funky reliever starter. I think he can impact the game one way or the other. So I'm with you there. Great pick. Thanks for joining us today. It was another team breakdown. The Chicago Cubs will be back with another.